The fossil record is a marvellous resource that provides scientists with a captivating view of the long-lost past. Our planet is ancient, and across the span of deep time, all kinds of extraordinary lineages have come and gone, occasionally leaving traces of their existence in the form of mineralized remnants from their bodies. One of the most exciting forms of fossils that prehistoric animals can leave are fossilized mummies, instances of exceptionally well-preserved skin and other soft tissues covering a good deal of the body. It should be clarified that these are not mummies in the technical sense, as this term is usually restricted to bodies that have been desiccated in some way and slowed from decaying, but still retain organic matter. This could be deliberate and due to artificial processes such as embalming, or it can happen in nature, forming so-called natural mummies. The fossils we're talking about here then are instead the mineralized remains of very well preserved ancient bodies. In some cases there was a natural mummification process that happened millions of years ago, and then the tissues of the mummies were replaced by minerals during the fossilization process. So they are fossils of the mummies. However, there are other ways in which these exceptional fossils end up being preserved that don't involve a typical mummification process. And in other instances, the skin patterns surrounding the bones are simply the impressions of the skin that were made in the ancient sediment and not the direct remnants of the skin itself. This is why the term mummy is generally used in an informal way when referring to these fossils. Whatever the exact mechanisms of their preservation, there's no denying that these are some spectacular fossils, and they give us an invaluable glimpse into what these prehistoric animals were once like. So let's take a look at some of them. Here are 5 mummified prehistoric creatures. First of all, there's an absolutely astonishing fossilized frog mummy which has been preserved for more than 34 million years. This remarkable fossil clearly shows the eyes, mouth, nostrils, and even features of the skin of this little amphibian. This frog was uncovered at a locality in southwestern France known as the Quercy phosphorites. These rocks formed in fissures within limestones, as water entered the cracks in the limestone and transported phosphate into them, creating phosphatic clays. When the bodies of animals ended up in these limestone fissures, their remains would then be well preserved in these clays. Most of the ancient animals that ended up fossilized in the Quercy phosphorites only have their hard parts preserved, however. A diverse range of birds, mammals, reptiles, and insects are found here, but only a few select amphibians and snakes retain soft tissue structures. The most stunning of these finds has got to be the frog mummy, which was actually first reported in 1873. When scientists originally described it in the 19th century, they initially thought that it was just an external cast of the frog's body. But in 2013, paleontologists put the frog through a CT scanner to see what was left on the inside, and were amazed to discover that a large part of the skeleton was in fact preserved. A complete skull, plus much of the backbone and the bones within the left arm, are all entombed within the mineralized body. Thanks to this new insight into the interior skeleton of the mummy, the scientists were able to tell that this frog is a member of the extinct species Thaumastosaurus gezii, a species that had previously been discovered in the Quercy phosphorites but was so far only known from skulls. The exceptional preservation of the specimen, retaining both external features as well as the skeleton, therefore enabled paleontologists to learn more about the evolutionary relationships of this particular prehistoric frog, finding it to have a closer relation to African frogs such as the African bullfrog instead of South American ones, as had been previously thought. Other mummified creatures found in the Quercy phosphorites include more specimens of Thaumastosaurus, a salamander, and some snakes, though most of these only preserve parts of the bodies. The salamander specimen, a kind of frog-eating species called Phosphotriton, has a good deal of the torso mummified, and when scientists CT scanned this one, they were able to identify the spinal cord, a lung, the digestive tract, urogenital organs, and muscles still intact within this remarkable fossil. Inside the digestive tract, they even found the remains of a frog, which is how they know this prehistoric salamander was a predator of these animals, an unusual type of diet for salamanders. Unfortunately, all of these mummified specimens seem to have come from a single locality within the Quercy phosphorites that appears to have been lost. All the mummies were collected in the 19th century, and since then soft tissue remains preserved in this fashion have not been found at any other Quercy phosphorite sites. The fact that they all came from this single locality also suggests that something special was going on here that enabled the small animals to become mummified. The soft tissues of the bodies have been permineralized by phosphate, as it was transported by the water that permeated the fissures in the limestone, and some researchers have suggested that this phosphate could have been coming from the bones of other animals that had accumulated in these fissures. However, another idea put forward by paleontologists is that the supply of phosphate may have come from bat guano, that is, bat excrement. Guano is particularly rich in phosphate, and bats are very common in the Quercus too. So it might be that we have to thank bat poop for providing this abundant source of phosphate, which eventually led to the stunning preservation of this mummified frog. Next, there's a dinosaur called Edmontosaurus, which has been the subject of much interest when it comes to fossil mummies. This animal is a hadrosaur, large herbivores commonly called the duck-billed dinosaurs, and lived between about 73 and 66 million years ago. Several specimens of this prehistoric reptile have been discovered with some rather incredible remnants of skin covering much of the body, and thanks to these, paleontologists now have a pretty good idea of what these dinosaurs would have looked like in the flesh. The first fossilized mummy of this dinosaur was uncovered back in 1908 in Wyoming. This remarkable specimen was unearthed by the renowned fossil hunter Charles Sternberg and his sons, who were also responsible for discovering more mummified dinosaurs in the 1910s. This initial Edmontosaurus mummy is currently housed at the American Museum of Natural History, while one of the Sternberg family's other finds is kept at the Senckenberg Natural History Museum in Frankfurt, Germany. In 1999, yet another full-body Edmontosaurus mummy was uncovered in North Dakota. Plus, there are other discoveries of partial Edmontosaurus bodies with some mummification, such as a specimen found in Alberta that preserves a bit of the head and neck. Another kind of hadrosaur for which mummies have been discovered is Corythosaurus, a species also known from Alberta. One of these well-preserved mummies is also on display at the American Museum of Natural History, but there was originally a second specimen preserving some patches of skin that was unfortunately lost during World War I. This specimen had also been found by Sternberg, and was being transported from Canada to Britain by the SS Mount Temple along with more of Sternberg's fossil finds in 1916. However, the ship was sunk in the Atlantic after it was attacked by a German warship, and all of the fossils on board went down with it. So somewhere out there at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, there's actually another dinosaur mummy. Anyway, the original 1908 Edmontosaurus mummy really is one of the most impressive fossil finds ever made of a dinosaur. It's an almost complete body, only missing part of the tail, hind feet, and hip region. The dinosaur was preserved lying on its back, with the head extending down and over the back in a classic death pose, pulled there by tendons contracting as they decayed. The skin itself tightly adheres to the bones, and looking at the underside of the dinosaur, you can see how the skin appears to have sunken into the body cavity. This indicates that the dinosaur's carcass had likely been exposed on the surface of a terrestrial environment for some time after death, resulting in the body becoming deflated as decay gases and liquids were released, followed by a desiccation process that dried it out. So this particular specimen is indeed a fossil of a natural mummy. Preserved skin can be seen across most of the body, although not much is left on the skull. An estimated 2/3 of the entire skin covering is preserved in this mummy, and it's suspected that the whole body might have been wrapped in skin, but some of it was probably lost during the excavation process, seeing as the fossil hunters were not expecting to find preserved skin on this dinosaur. The Edmontosaurus mummy now housed in the Senckenberg Museum in Germany was preserved in a different fashion, and does not seem to have been desiccated before fossilization. Instead, considering that the skin does not closely adhere to the bones and seems to follow the outline of the body, this mummy was probably preserved thanks to very rapid burial after the animal's death, rather than the body drying out first. This specimen is also slightly more complete than the original mummy in terms of the bones present, missing just one of the back legs and the tip of the tail. However, the extent of the skin preservation is not the same as in the first mummy, only covering the forelimbs, neck, and right side of the body. The keratinous extension of the beak is also very clear in the specimen, showing what the mouths of the so-called duckbills would have looked like. Not particularly duck-like, as it turns out. Instead, the horny covering extends downwards and gives these dinosaurs a more shovel-beaked appearance. The other complete body mummy I mentioned is the one discovered in 1999 in North Dakota, which is now kept in the North Dakota State Fossil Collection, and this specimen is nicknamed, well, Dakota. It was fully excavated during an expedition in 2006, and is another beautiful partial skeleton preserving large swathes of attached skin. Dakota lacks a head, part of the tail, and the left forelimb, but everything else is there. Skin is present over a good deal of the body, indicated here by the red and yellow sections. One of the most stunning parts of this particular mummy is the right forelimb, which looks like it could have come from an animal that died yesterday. The details of the different scale types are just exquisite, and it clearly shows how the bones of the hand would have been encased in a so-called flesh mitten. I'm sure that's a technical term you were expecting to hear today. Digits 3 and 4 of the hand were completely encased within the mitten, and there was a single hoof-like nail at the tip. Meanwhile, digit 2, which is this one here on the inside of the hand, is semi-contained within the mitten, but also sticks out a bit. Digit 5, the one on the outside of the hand, projects from further up, and then there's no digit 1 at all. Interestingly, the study of the Dakota specimen sheds more light on how some of these mind-blowing dinosaur fossils came to be mummified in such a way. Dakota again seems to have undergone some desiccation after death, as the preserved skin appears deflated and closely overlays the bones. However, there's also evidence that this Edmontosaurus had been scavenged, with feeding traces preserved on the skin and exposed bone that may have been inflicted by crocodiliforms and other carnivores. This therefore indicates that Dakota's body must have been exposed on the surface for some time after death, allowing these scavengers access to the carcass. Although it had been previously thought that such a situation could never lead to extensive soft tissue preservation, clearly Dakota proves otherwise. What seems to have happened here is that the action of the scavengers and decomposing organisms breaking open the carcass actually allowed gases and fluids from inside the body to escape, basically draining the body of its insides as they decayed and leaving just the skeleton and most of the skin. It's pretty gruesome imagery, but this process likely increased the chances of the skin getting fossilized, as the removal of the internal viscera and associated microbes would have slowed the decomposition of the skin and allowed it to dry out faster. The desiccated, gutted carcass would then have been buried by sediment and eventually fossilized, preserving the skin detail for all these millions of years. Looking at all these specimens, along with the various other smaller patches of Edmontosaurus skin that have been found, we can now tell a good deal about what the skin of these dinosaurs would have looked like. Over most of the body, the skin shows two distinct types of scales. There are the small pebbly scales that break up clusters of larger, smooth polygonal scales. On the underside regions of the dinosaur, these clusters of larger scales are small in area, and are arranged roughly in line with each other going along the length of the body. But then on the sides of the body, the clusters get more extensive and are more irregularly distributed. The forearms break from this trend, having only larger polygonal scales on the top surface and smaller pebbly scales on the bottom. So it's pretty incredible to think that we can tell this much minute detail about the scale distribution on the bodies of these long extinct dinosaurs. Not only that, but we can also tell that the scale types probably differed between species of Edmontosaurus. The distribution I just described is what's known for Edmontosaurus annectens, which is the species the original mummy and the Senckenberg mummy are both classified as, and this is probably what Dakota is too. But the other recognised species, Edmontosaurus regalis, lived a little bit earlier on, and is currently only recognised from a formation in Canada. Some specimens of this species are known with skin preserved as well, showing that on at least one part of the body, there were clusters of irregular scales with deep corrugations expanding out in a radial pattern from a central raised, smooth plateau. This scale type has so far not been identified in Edmontosaurus annectens. So thanks to these remarkable discoveries, we can tell that in addition to the bones of these species being different, they appear to have also had different skin. Another very cool discovery of a partial mummified Edmontosaurus regalis specimen also revealed that this species had a soft tissue crest on its head that sort of resembled a cock's comb. This fleshy comb was likely used as a sexual display feature, and it's something we would never have known about from just the bones of this dinosaur. It's uncertain if Edmontosaurus annectens had such a crest, so this could be another soft tissue difference between the species. One other aspect of these dinosaur mummies that's been the subject of much discussion among paleontologists is whether the skin that we see next to the bones are simply the impressions of the scales imprinted on the surrounding sediment, or if they're really the mineralized remnants of the scales themselves. In certain cases, it seems most likely that the skin has just been impressed on sediment. However, scientists have been able to analyze the scales preserved in Dakota using advanced analytical techniques, revealing that, at least in this case, there is biologically derived material. Amazingly, it turns out that the composition of the keratinous tissues and colour-giving melanin pigments of these dinosaurs likely contributed to this exceptional level of preservation. Trace amounts of zinc and copper were detected in the skin of Dakota, and would have aided in slowing down the decay of the skin, as these metals were harmful to bacteria. Melanin pigments and keratinous tissues are known to have traces of these metals in some living organisms, and so it may be that hadrosaur skin is so readily fossilized due to its specific chemical composition. The long history of Edmontosaurus mummies is truly fascinating, and thanks to these astonishing finds, we've learned so much about the preservation of prehistoric soft tissues. Next on our list, we're travelling even further back in time as we meet creatures that were mummified some 250 million years ago, a truly astonishing length of time to be preserved. This is Lystrosaurus, a kind of animal called a therapsid. Therapsids include the lineage that would one day lead to the mammals, such as us humans, but it also includes many other groups of animals that went completely extinct millions of years ago. Lystrosaurus is one of these, and so while it's not a mammal itself, it's somewhat related to them. Lystrosaurus is well known for a few reasons. It's probably best known to the public now for its brief appearance in Jurassic World Dominion, and its featuring in various other paleomedia. But it's also of great interest when considering evolution and extinctions, since Lystrosaurus was a survivor of the end Permian mass extinction event, the so-called Great Dying, the worst extinction in the history of life on Earth, that took place around 252 million years ago. At a site in South Africa that preserves rocks from right around the very start of the Triassic, paleontologists uncovered a mass death assemblage of Lystrosaurus individuals, revealing a stunning window into this horrifying time in Earth's history. The site preserves various rather complete Lystrosaurus skeletons, as well as bone beds made up of the intermingled remains of many different Lystrosauruses. The more complete skeletons were found in clusters, and are fossilized lying on their bellies with their limbs spread-eagled. Upon closer inspection, the paleontologists studying this site found that two of these skeletons also had a thin coating of a dark brown mineral layer tightly enveloping the bones. This layer has a distinctive surface texture with lots of little bumps all over it, and when looking closely at the layer where it goes over the spines of the backbones, you can see how the pointed spines actually pierce the layer. This mineral layer therefore seems to be the remains of the Lystrosaurus's desiccated skin, meaning these two specimens were mummified. Considering the whole context of this Lystrosaurus death assemblage, it appears that these mummified bodies and the other skeletons found here were all wiped out during periods of particularly severe drought. Paleontologists made many comparisons to modern animals that perished in droughts and the effect this can have on their carcasses as the skin dries out and desiccates. The spread-eagled positioning of the legs closely matches what has been documented in cases of young elephants that have sadly died after collapsing from exhaustion around a vanished water source. In these cases, the skin also becomes very quickly dried out and desiccates, forming what can be considered a natural mummy. Most of the time though, these modern elephant carcasses will then get scattered before any burial occurs. All these Lystrosaurus individuals were therefore probably drawn to diminishing watering holes during these periods of harsh aridity, explaining why so many were found in these clusters. After dying from heat exhaustion, starvation, or dehydration, the skin on at least a couple of them then dried out and stuck closely to the bones, similar to some of the Edmontosaurus mummies, before the natural mummies were then covered over by sediment and preserved for over 250 million years. The researchers found that these harsh droughts coincide with the significant increase in global temperatures that occurred during the Great Dying, as the intense volcanic activity created unstable atmospheric conditions. The scientists also showed that all of the Lystrosaurus skeletons here were either juveniles or young subadults, showing just how difficult it was for these poor animals to get to adulthood in this harsh and unforgiving environment. So these Lystrosaurus mummies offer a chilling insight into this particularly awful time in Earth's past, and demonstrate just how much it must have sucked to be alive during the Great Dying. I mean, the name does kind of tell you all you need to know. Heading forward in time once more to the domain of the dinosaurs, let's investigate another one of the incredible hadrosaur mummies that have been discovered. This time, it's not Edmontosaurus. It's another kind of so-called duckbill named Brachylophosaurus. This hadrosaur lived between about 78.5 and 77.6 million years ago, and is known from fossils uncovered in Canada as well as the US. The Brachylophosaurus mummy we're talking about here was excavated in the summer of 2000 in Montana, and it's a subadult individual nicknamed Leonardo. Much of the body is preserved, only really missing the base and end parts of the tail, and it's been estimated that it retains 80 to 90% of its skin covering. This skin can be found on all regions of the body except for a section of the right forelimb and on the face of the dinosaur, although the keratinous extension of the beak is preserved, similar to the Edmontosaurus mummies. Once again, paleontologists have been able to examine the structure of the scaly skin across the preserved parts of the body, showing that the neck, shoulders, sides, and at least some of the tail of the dinosaur were covered by small basement scales, measuring between 2 and 4 millimeters in diameter. Much larger scales were found on the hind limbs as well as on the forearms. Further down the forearms and onto the hands, the scales then grade into smaller structures. And once more, the mummy shows that the second, third, and fourth fingers of these dinosaurs were encased in a flesh mitten. There's also a row of large midline feature scales positioned down the back of the dinosaur, with each one occurring above the spines of the individual backbones. This row of triangular to hatchet-shaped enlarged scales stretches from the base of the neck to the base of the tail, and might have extended further down the tail too. The skin is quite tightly associated with the underlying bones in Leonardo, suggesting that the specimen was likely a fossilized natural mummy that underwent some desiccation prior to burial. Notably though, the area around the base of the neck shows an extensive region of soft tissues, indicating that this part of the dinosaur would have been heavily muscled in life, giving it a neck that appeared very thick. Some traces of Leonardo's last meal have also been found within the mummified remains. Analysing the gut region of the dinosaur's carcass, lots of small fragments of leaves were identified that had been ingested by the animal shortly before it perished. Not only that, but further investigation of the gut region, based on small samples extracted from the mummy, revealed evidence of parasites that were living within the intestines of Leonardo while it was still alive. Trace fossils can be seen as thin lines within the gut contents that look suspiciously like tiny burrows. As such, it's suspected that they were created by parasitic worms that were chilling in the guts of this Brachylophosaurus. The researchers think it's more likely these worms were inhabiting the dinosaur's intestines while it was still alive, rather than representing scavenging worms that found their way into the carcass after death, since they're pretty deep within the guts and because the dinosaur's body is otherwise fairly intact. So another astonishing, if somewhat grisly discovery, that allows us an unprecedented window into the life and times of this long dead dinosaur. Somewhat surprisingly though, not a whole lot has really been published on the remarkable Leonardo specimen compared to the amount of media attention it's gathered over the years, including its own 2008 Discovery Channel documentary, Secrets of the Dinosaur Mummy. It would be great to have some more comprehensive published analyses of all the fine details of soft tissue this mummy preserves, so hopefully that's something we'll see soon. Nevertheless, Leonardo is another absolutely incredible mummified prehistoric creature. The final entry on our list of extraordinary mummified extinct animals is another dinosaur. This one is younger than the hadrosaur fossils we've looked at so far, being unearthed from rocks dating to right at the end of the Cretaceous period, around the time that the asteroid impacted the Earth and spelt doom for all the non-bird dinosaurs, as well as many other lineages. In fact, it's even been claimed that this mummified dinosaur was killed on the very day that the asteroid hit, 66 million years ago. The dinosaur we're talking about here is a little herbivore called Thescelosaurus. At least, that's what it most likely is, since this mummy only preserves the leg of the animal, but it looks like a match for other more complete remains of the dinosaur. Thescelosaurus is a member of the Ornithischian dinosaurs, one of the major divisions of these reptiles that include groups such as the ceratopsians, the stegosaurs, the ankylosaurs, the hadrosaurs, and various others. Thescelosaurus itself may in fact have been a burrowing dinosaur. Examination of its brain shape, which can be seen thanks to digital reconstructions of the space within the preserved brain case, revealed that it had sensory abilities suited to life in a burrow, such as a narrow hearing range and an especially well-developed sense of smell. Plus, some of its close relatives have been found as fossils within burrows. Although this Thescelosaurus mummy has not yet been fully described, news outlets have reported on it, and it was featured in the 2022 BBC documentary Dinosaurs: The Final Day with David Attenborough. The leg preserves remarkable details of the scaly skin that would have covered this part of the animal, showing that at least this region of Thescelosaurus would definitely have been scaly. And it's particularly significant for being one of the few so-called dinosaur mummies that aren't of hadrosaurs. From the brief reports we've had of this leg so far, it seems the appendage was very quickly ripped off of the rest of the animal before being rapidly buried, with no obvious signs of other injuries on the leg, no indication of scavenging, and no trace of disease. So, as Professor Paul Barrett of the London Natural History Museum states, the best idea that we have is that this is an animal that died more or less instantaneously. The Thescelosaurus leg was discovered at a remarkable site in North Dakota that has been nicknamed the Tanis site by the paleontologists studying it, after the ancient Egyptian archaeological site and in particular reference to its portrayal as a lost city in Raiders of the Lost Ark. The Tanis site has been the subject of a great deal of controversy that I won't go into too much detail about here, but there's some further reading linked in the sources below if you're interested. The site has garnered much interest from paleontologists and the public alike, due to the possibility that it might record the direct after effects of the infamous asteroid strike. Essentially, it may preserve rocks that were laid down on the exact day that the Cretaceous period ended, when the Chicxulub impactor hit the Gulf of Mexico some 3,000 kilometers away from where the site is located. Various structures in the deposits of sedimentary rocks at the site show that these sediments were laid down very rapidly as water surged across the land. This onshore surge appears to have originated from a local seiche, a large standing wave, that the paleontologists think was the result of earthquakes triggered by the asteroid strike. Further evidence for the Tanis site's association with the asteroid impact includes deposits of ejected material that had been launched into the air and rained down, as well as a layer that was enriched in the element iridium, a rare element on Earth, but one which is more common in asteroids. Along with these geological signals indicating a catastrophic event at Tanis, there's a mass death assemblage here. Numerous fish fossils are found here, specifically paddlefish and sturgeon, alongside fossils of turtles, small mammals, preserved skin from a triceratops, and even a pterosaur egg, with the skeleton of the embryo still inside it. Most of these findings have yet to be published in detail. However, a study that analysed the fish fossils at the site established that they all died during springtime in the northern hemisphere. This remarkable discovery was achieved by examining thin sections of the bones as well as their stable isotope ratios, which indicated that they had all died suddenly at this time of the year. So this would seem to suggest that the asteroid strike must have happened during springtime in the northern hemisphere, which may be another reason why the impact was particularly devastating for life on Earth, since this is an especially sensitive time in many species' annual life cycles. Understandingly, there has been some skepticism about whether the Tanis site really does record the after effects of the Chicxulub asteroid impact, with some scientists calling for more peer-reviewed studies of the locality to be undertaken so that we can get a better assessment of what's preserved at the site. Already though, it's given us some remarkable fossils and a fascinating glimpse into what very well could have been the final day of the dinosaurs. And the Thescelosaurus leg is another spectacular mummified prehistoric creature. Well, a bit of a prehistoric creature anyway. So there are 5 prehistoric creatures that were found as mummified fossils. This style of preservation truly is astounding. and these rare fossils can teach us so much about the life appearance, biology, and deaths of these animals that existed millions and millions of years ago. If you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed to my other channel 7 Days of Science. Over on this channel, my co-presenters and I make weekly videos covering all the most fascinating science news of the past week. So if you like a good way to keep up to date with the latest discoveries, you might like what we do over there. We also have a Patreon page where you can support us in return for some fun bonus content. Also, if you're a fan of science and cool notebooks, then be sure to check out the amazing designs by Atoms to Astronauts, and use our affiliate link in the description below to get 10% off. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Please do like this video and subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed it, and be sure to press that bell icon so you don't miss our next upload and so you can learn more about our world, its history, and the wonderful life that surrounds us all.